But welcome.
Thank you.
It's so good to see you guys. It is. It is. And can I have my paper there?
Sure.
Thanks. Appreciate that. And okay, so I know Ryan Smith, Representative Ryan Smith, and so I guess introduce yourself.
My name is Robert Sprague. I'm from
Okay.
Findlay, Ohio, so northwest Ohio, right near Toledo. And we, in Hardin County has one of the highest opiate overdose death rates per capita in the state of Ohio.
Wow.
And so that is kind of my interest from my district in this particular problem.
Well, we welcome you down to Southern Ohio. We hillbillies down here are very hospitable. We'll take good care of you, I promise.
It's been great so far.
Oh, good, good, good. But no, welcome to the program, guys. And first off, congratulations on we haven't had you here since you were
thank you.
elected and all of that. I know you've had quite some time to get settled in and do all of your work up in the big city of Columbus. And so what have you been into? What are some of your big surprises, I guess? What's been happening?
Well, I don't know if there's surprises, but I guess any budget you go through and you're working on, I'm on Finance Committee along with Robert. It's a challenging time because your task is to manage $62 billion budget and appropriate the funds that way. So there's obviously a lot to learn when you join the legislature. It's a steep learning curve. There's a tremendous amount of subjects that we talk about, this being one of them. But I'm delighted to have this meeting in the district today because it is such a huge problem, and I want to make sure we shine a line on it here and hopefully gain some perspective and get some resources to help with the problem.
Yeah, and how'd you all end up in Jackson? I mean, what made you choose Jackson County, or are you doing this all over the place, all over your districts?
Well, Robert's the chair, I'm the vice chair, and obviously the problem in southeastern Ohio has been pretty well publicized. So I felt like Jackson was a good place to start. They've got a drug task force that's started up and done some good things. We really could have picked any county in southeastern Ohio because the problem's so prevalent. But this seemed like the logical place to start. Next week we're having it in Hardin County in Robert's
great.
district.
Okay.
From there we proceed to Lucas County in Toledo area, and then Cuyahoga in the Cleveland area.
Wow. Okay. So you guys are traveling all over the place. This is wonderful. So, you know, we were talking about this on the show yesterday and you know, talking about the press release and whatever. And then, you know, you read it and then you say, lots of luck. You know, how on earth, what makes you think that you can possibly make a difference with this drug problem that is just so rampant in our state and, well, actually throughout the country. But, you know, do you all have any ideas? Do you have anything that you think you may be able to implement?
Well, I think we're going to focus on three areas for the committee. We're going to focus obviously on defining the size and the scope of the problem. The second piece is we know that there's a direct correlation between the number of prescriptions made for prescriptions of opiates like Vicodin and Oxycontin and Percocet. We know that there's a direct correlation between the number of prescriptions that are made and distributed in the state of Ohio and the overdose death rate and also the number of people who are struggling with addiction. And so I think that one of the areas that we will explore is how do we look at the way our standards of care work in the medical community to limit as much as possible the number of prescriptions being made in the state. And then I think the third piece, obviously, is for those who are already struggling with addiction, how do we get them better treatment? We know that there's a high relapse rate for this. It's right around 90% of people that struggle with addiction. They detox, they make progress, and then they relapse. And so we need to find some kind of holistic treatment that over a long period of time helps people maintain their sobriety.
Well, I think, yeah, because you're talking about a physical and a mental addiction, and while you can overcome the physical addiction, you can lock someone in a closet, or I'm being a smart aleck about that, but the whole mental thing to overcome it is a whole other issue, and that's what people are struggling with all the time. And the one thing that I find very interesting in talking with people, I mean, I know many people that have become addicted to prescription pills especially, And a lot of it is they didn't just do it for recreational use. They started out, they were in a car accident or something, and over time became addicted, and then they just don't know how to quit it. And that's what's sad.
That's been a common theme that we've seen a lot. A lot of people, just like you said, they get injured in an accident, they end up on a prescription drug to help with the pain, and unfortunately the addictive nature of the drugs that we've seen come out in the last 15 years is so much greater than what anything we've seen in the past. So therefore it is leading to a bigger problem from that front. And then when House Bill 93 was introduced by Representative Johnson out of Scioto County, it shut down the pill mills. So we've had a decrease in the amount of prescription drugs on the street, if you will, or the illicit prescriptions coming out. But what we've seen is a transgression over to heroin, meth, and that type of thing.
That's what I was going to ask you, and it's cheap.
It is. Economically, people tend to trend that way anyway because the pills are more expensive. So if you can get a high, and what we find is heroin is so much stronger than what these prescription drugs are, it's far more dangerous. And what we will also find, where the prescription drugs are made by pharmaceutical companies and are consistent in their makeup, heroin is changed along the way. It's diluted in a lot of different things, and oftentimes you hear of a bad batch somewhere and 3 or 4 overdose deaths coming up, and it is as you mentioned, an enormous problem. And I think we've come to the realization there's no one silver bullet. It's going to take multiple facets and multiple fronts attacking this problem, and really the communities need to help in solving that problem.
They do, and the first thing is for everybody to admit there is a problem. And it annoys me so much when people say, oh, we don't have drug problems in our schools, or we don't have drug problems in our area. Yeah, well, yes, we do. So let's get past that and let's move on to what we're going to do to fix it. And you're right, the community does have to get involved. So what are, what's going to happen at this meeting today? What can people expect? I assume it's open to the public.
It is.
Okay. So I guess tell everybody about what's going to happen at the meeting, what time, and all of that stuff.
It's at 1 p.m. at Holzer Medical Center in the education room as you come in the front door. And
right across from where Jenny Neville sits. Y'all know what I mean.
And
you'll get to meet her later.
All right, very good. And we'll be having testimony starting at 1 p.m. We already have had, through our press releases, 18 witnesses contact our offices to sign up for this committee meeting. And I don't know that I'm an expert on legislative traveling study committees, but I think that indicates a strong amount of interest in this topic.
I would say so.
And so we will go through those 18 witnesses, and then we welcome anyone from the public who would like to come and testify. They just need to come, and we will work them into the schedule. And I
Wonderful.
think, back on another topic, one of the reasons why we're here and traveling as opposed to having these committee hearings in Columbus is because this problem has become pervasive in every single community. It's not limited to Jackson County down here. It's not limited to Hardin County up in northwest Ohio. It is literally in every community because, and I think that this is key, a lot of people don't realize the close proximity chemically between heroin, which is an opiate, and the prescription opiates like Vicodin, Oxycontin, Percocet. And as you mentioned, there are a lot of people that have become hooked simply through a doctor's prescription. They're trying to heal, and now they're struggling with addiction. And so this is something that affects the entire state. And the Ohio House has come to the realization that we absolutely have to take more action on this and try to find some solutions.
Well, I want to commend you guys because you are taking on probably the toughest issue that there is out there right now. You know, I don't want to say it's easy to balance a budget, but that's getting down with a pencil and paper and figuring it out. You know, having to control people's actions and cure them of something is a whole different thing. And, you know, you all don't profess to be doctors, I don't think, but you're doing the best that you can. And I assume that you're taking advice from everybody, from every facet of life.
And I think that's what's important about today's committee, as we hear testimony from people who are affected by this every day, whether it be judges, law enforcement, reformed addicts, parents of addicts, rehabilitation centers. all these folks are bringing their stories, and it allows us to study this and look at it from all different perspectives so that we can somehow form a more comprehensive plan that we feel like will be more effective and give people the resources to get better.
Yeah, and you have to almost put yourself in the middle of it. And, you know, it's easy to look at the outside, from the outside in, and say, well, you're just a pill popper or whatever. But you have to, like, really get into the story and meet the parents and meet the person and meet the sisters and brothers and kids and all of that. And because it's a huge story. And
we had an opportunity yesterday to visit a clinic that is providing treatment in Scioto County. And they have a residential treatment center for young ladies. And in this case, they are trying to help young ladies who are pregnant so that their child doesn't come out of the womb addicted to heroin or opiates. And we had some dramatic testimony. I'll let Representative Smith maybe just touch on that a little bit. But
we were able to sit down with a couple of the clients there, and they told us their story. And they told us they were very open and honest, very appreciative of us being there, but we were probably more appreciative of what we learned in that meeting.
Right, because you have to, first off, you get mad and you say, how on earth can you be pregnant and doing this stuff? What's wrong with you? But then you have to talk to them. You have to get their story. They're human beings.
There are too many babies being born addicted to opiates in Ohio and really all throughout the country. This particular house allows mothers who are pregnant to come in with their children who are 12 and under and live in the same environment.
Oh, wow.
You know, what we've seen with this problem is, and I think the family unit over the last couple of decades has deteriorated. And what this is trying to do is hold that together, because this healing process is so difficult on families and everything else. It allows them to continue to function and give their children a stable environment with a consistent positive message, and they are doing amazing things there.
Wonderful. Glad to hear it. Are you a Republican?
Yes.
Okay. I was just seeing if y'all were working. This isn't a Republican. This is one of those things you could actually talk about that isn't a Republican-Democrat issue.
Yeah, it really.
You know, it doesn't.
It really is not. And you'll find, and I think you'll find in the committee today, we just have a number of members from both parties that are just interested in solving the problem.
Which is great.
As I said, I mean, it's pervasive, and it is something that we've got to work together to get a solution. And I wanted to double back just on something that you mentioned, and Ryan mentioned, which is that this is such a, it's almost like a different epidemic than, say, crack cocaine even, which, you know, we kind of had a spike and then it leveled down. Even the methamphetamines, as you talk to the judges and the prosecutors, the treatment professionals, they will tell you that the drive for opiates, because it hits that receptor in your brain that releases these endorphins, which is such a natural thing that we normally get as human beings when we eat food and do other basic functions as a human being. That is such a powerful draw that this addiction actually changes the way your brain, the circuits in your brain, and the way that your body works. And that is why it is so difficult to get off of it. It becomes all-consuming. The only thing you're focused on is making sure that those receptors in your brain are filled, and that you're able to kind of, you know, and there's a real physical component to getting off the drug, where, you know, people, they literally feel that, Representative Johnson, who's treating this, and he's a doctor, he said it's like torture. He said literally it's like torture. If you wanted to torture somebody, you would get them high on prescription opiates and things and then take it away from them, because he said that it is that terrible physically. And so, you know, I think that's one of the things that we're facing, and people need to realize that there's a real physical component to this addiction issue. I
was talking with a judge one time, and he sat me down and he said, do you understand heroin? And I said, well, no, I don't, you know. And he said, okay, let me tell you about heroin. This is what it does. And he went through the entire physiological, you know, there's like, what, 12 receptors or something, and it fires on every single one of them. And, you know, food may do 2 or 3. And he went on and on and on and explained this whole thing to me. It scared the heck out of me, I'll be honest with you. And I know now why people say you do this, like heroin one time and you're addicted. You understand now, because your entire life goes around getting that next high. So,
And just to build off of that, I think that's another problem with this particular type of addiction, which is with alcoholism, it could take you years to become an alcoholic. With things like marijuana or even crack, it can take a while to become addicted to that. With this epidemic, it's a matter of days or weeks before you become addicted. So.
Yeah, and it's just so quick. So the meeting today, that's going to be very interesting because you're going to have testimony then from people. That's wonderful, because who better to hear from than people that have been there and done that? And then maybe they can explain to others why not to do what they started. But so besides these meetings that you're having, what else do you foresee in the future to combat this problem?
Well, I think the meetings are the first step in order to gain a better insight as to what the problem is. And the people testifying that I've talked to, I ask them to kind of summarize the problem, but also help us with maybe here's an opportunity. Here's what I see that you might be able to change to affect this problem. So hopefully from the study committee findings, what we'll have is enough knowledge to be able to possibly make some changes, be it through legislation or working with the State Board of Pharmacy, the Ohio State Medical Association, whoever it might be.
Okay. And, where does Ohio rank as a state in problems with addiction and the opiates?
I'm not sure exactly where we rank, but I know that there is a corridor for illicit prescription drugs that kind of runs from Detroit to Florida.
Yeah, it goes right down 35 here and 23 and yeah.
And so, unfortunately, just like a distribution channel for TVs, we happen to be kind of in the middle of that corridor. And, so obviously it's going to continue to be a problem simply because, and as you described, the heroin is also a distribution phenomena. They can distribute that easily. We saw an article in the paper the other day where it's being distributed really out of Columbus. And Columbus, just like for TV sets and other things for Best Buy, say, where they have a distribution center in Columbus, likewise for the drugs. And so we'll struggle with this a little bit just simply because we are in the nexus of this logistical distribution center for this drug.
Well, yes, and again, I commend you all because it seems as if you're fighting a losing battle, to be honest with you. And I guess though you have to try, number one, and number two, if you can help one person, if you can help one group, one family, then you've done your job.
One of the things I'd point out, and I know it does seem like a losing battle, but just like with House Bill 93, as we talked to Representative Johnson yesterday about that helped dry up the pills. Not completely, obviously. They're still coming from other places, but for the most part, it helped dry it up. Now, what that did was it kept people from their initial addiction problems. Most people don't start out and start with heroin and get addicted to that. So if it's a gateway, maybe we've cut off a little bit of that gateway. So I think incrementally we make change, and overall we can make a difference.
And I'd like to just add a little bit to that. Interestingly, this really took off in the late 90s. And in the late 90s, the legislature passed what was called the Intractable Pain Act, which kind of gave the green light to the medical community that we want you to aggressively treat chronic pain. And up to that point, right, it was really only cancer patients that were treated aggressively for pain. And some of these drugs really were developed for cancer patients. And so as a legislature, in some ways we affected the upswing of this because as a government, we set the standards of care that we expect the medical community to follow. So in some ways, I know you may look at that and say, gee, that's terrible. But in another way, it's a cause for hope because just as we set the standards of care that kind of led to this pendulum swinging too far and now maybe too aggressively treating pain, there might be some indication that as a government, we, through those institutions like the Pharmacy Board and the State Medical Board and even the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services and the surveys that they send out, all of those institutions that tell doctors how they should be practicing medicine, we as a government have a substantial amount of control over those. And so hopefully we will be able to move the pendulum back in the other direction.
I think that sounds great to me, and you make a good case for that.